I'm not going to beat around the bush. I love Porsche, particularly 911s. For me, driving is the number one thing that I look for in a car, and every time I hop into one of Stuttgart's rear-engine automobiles, I get that warm, cozy feeling of coming home. The outgoing 991 Porsche is now an old model, and there's one specific variant that I haven't quite got my head around, the 911T. I remembered when Porsche unveiled this car, and the first thing I said to myself was, this feels oddly marketed for those who can't really quite afford a GT3 but want the bits off of it, like the seats, like the lightweight glass, etc. But it just felt a little bit strange because it's nothing like the 911T of the original. But I am a believer that you shouldn't criticise a car until you have driven it, and that's what I have been doing. I've been driving this car for the last week now, and in this video I'm going to explain honestly my thoughts and opinions with this Porsche 911 Carrera T. It also comes with some goodies that you won't find on a standard Carrera, like the limited slip differential, the PASM, Porsche's adaptive damping system, which gives a 20mm drop in the suspension. Sports exhaust is standard as well too. Plus you get stickers on the side and a fancy yellow paint, which is a no-cost option. Also, rear wheel steering can be specified as an optional extra, something that you can't find on the standard Carrera yet again. And this particular car is specced with carbon ceramic brakes, which I'll get to later on in a second. It's got the comfort seat, it's got the rear wheel steering, and it's also got the radio and sat nav, and this one has a 7-speed manual gearbox. So, what is this car like to drive? Well, fundamentally, this isn't a track car. It's a 911, it's a Carrera, so if it needs to really work on a B road. I'll be very honest with you, the first couple of days driving this, I was scratching my head. I was trying to understand it. You know, the purpose of what it is that makes a 911 Carrera T. And if you hark back to the original car, which is a strict back, poverty spec, entry-level car, where, you know, it was the purest 911 of the lot. This one isn't. In fact, this car sits in between the Carrera S and the Carrera, and once you start putting the options on, like the desirable 918 bucket seats, etc., it ends up being more expensive than the Carrera S. And then I went for a drive. I started driving it a little bit more, and I went on some lovely B roads near where I live, and we're on some lovely B roads in the Cotswolds at the minute. And to drive, well, it's a 911, isn't it? Of course it's going to be good. Let's talk about some of the changes done to this car. This 7-speed manual gearbox, now, it's got a shorter throw, it's also got shorter gearing. It's the same gearing that you'd find in a Carrera S. Can you tell the difference in the shorter gear ratios? Not really, it still pulls at 60 mph in second gear. However, you do have to stir it a little bit more than, say, a Cayman in order to get into the power band and, you know, at certain RPMs. The motor, well, it's a 3-litre twin turbocharged flat 6. Do you know what? Forget the noise, because we all know it's not like the original. Power delivery is just superb. You get it wind up about above 2000 RPM, and the thing just sings all the way to the red line at 7000 RPM, and there seems to be no drop at all. It pulls all the way to the top, just like that. So that's really good. The steering, okay, it's an e-pass system. It's improved. Of course it's improved from the 991.1. It's a little bit light, but what steering system has feel? And this one, as far as most modern cars are, is just great. It's really nice. You can place it exactly where you want it on the road. Now, if this was a new car, I'd be quite harsh with it. In fact, I would say that you're better off buying a Carrera model and playing about with it yourself and save the extra cash. But this isn't a new car. You cannot buy a 991 Porsche anymore because at the minute, or right now as we speak, we're on the 992 Porsche, the all-new 911. So this is the last narrow body 911, and that in a way makes it quite cool because it's smaller. I spent a little bit of time in a 992 and that feels a little bit larger. Not much, but you do sense that once you go on a country road and once you start throwing it about. This though, you can place it very nicely on a road, and the damping, you've got the PASM dampers, and also you've got this switchable, almost like a Manatino switch. You can go from normal, sport, plus. The mode I always leave it on is sport plus, keep the dampers off, and you do have the throttle blip as well, which allows you to do hill and tow by the systems. Personally, I have it off. The only way to turn it off is by turning off the traction control. And you guys must be thinking, why would I want to do that on the public road? Well, this car just has tons of grip. And on roads where we're on right now, where it's a little bit damp, it's a bit cold, it's a bit frosty, you sense the car moving around a little bit. It still is that lovely bit of 911 where you go into a corner, you know, a little bit more on the brakes, you can feel the mass moving around over the front axle, and then you can chase the throttle and you can feel the rear end squatting, finding that traction and firing you off into the horizon. It's all good stuff, real good stuff, but we need to talk about the elephant in the room. It's a Carrera T. Is it worth buying a Carrera T? I mean, I'm a 911 sucker, so I love these things, and I've owned too many Porsches to call myself a bit of a sad person. And the car I love the most is, of course, the 911 GT3, in which we spent quite a bit of time and made a really beautiful film about that. So, of course, it's not a GT product. Take that out of your head. But it does have some bits where certain buyers would appreciate, for the fact that you've got door straps on the side, like you find on a GT product Porsche, and you can specify it with the 918 bucket seats, which is quite cool. Them stuff are sort of bragging rights that you talk to your mates in the pub. It doesn't really move me personally, but for others, they'd like that. I almost forgot, on paper, this car doesn't sound like a lot of value for money because the engine only produces 365 horsepower. When you think of it like that, we've got hot hatches running 400 odd horsepower like an RS3 or a A45 AMG or a BMW M2 competition. But one thing I have to say is it's usable power. You'd be amazed by how many cars that you cannot extract the performance on the public road because you just end up going too fast for your own good. But this, you can use all of that power. Not all of it, probably up to the first, second, third, fourth. But you know, you got to remember you're always braking, accelerating, because this car's a B-road blast monster. And more importantly, this is also a car that you can use every day. You can daily this thing with no troubles at all. The ride is well judged. It's still on the firm side, of course, it's a sports car, but it's brilliant. It's super well judged. And even when you're like poodling around little villages, I've done some errands in this car, just normal town driving, and the one thing that I found really impressive is just how usable it is. You've still got the fruit at the front, I like to call it fruit, where you can put stuff in it. Okay, you can specify as a no-cost option. I shouldn't say specify, you can't buy this car anymore. You could find them with seats in the rear, which you could put small kids in. Also, you could use that as well too as your second boot with the no seats in it. Plus, another thing I need to mention is the sound deadening's been stripped out of this car. Can you tell that? No, not really, but you can hear a little bit more of that flat six, which is quite nice. So I need to come to a conclusion with this 911 Carrera T. I think it's a great first 911 for those who are keen drivers, who know that this isn't a GT3 product, who knows that this isn't the fastest car in the world. In fact, this car specified with a manual gearbox that's 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, which is still flipping quick. You know, if you put that into perspective of a V10 M5 that makes 500 horsepower, this car is plenty quick enough. So yeah, if you want a car to use for road trips, and you know, not in a shouty colour, if you didn't want the yellow, you wanted something like, I mean personally I'd go for a blue or a nice green, I like a green car, then this is a great 911 to jump into. It's not the biggest highlight, and I still think this car has been marketed a little bit too much for the drivers, because you know, what are the rest of the range of 911s? Are they not drivers' cars? Is the Carrera S not a driver's car? Is the 911 GTS not a driver's car? They're all drivers' cars. It's not the most pure though, and I don't think it's a celebration at all to what the original 911T is. It does pay a homage for sure, but it's more of a car that kind of is there because they just wanted to make another model, and they've already made so many models. It kind of reminds me of a Porsche Cayman R. Now, I used to own a Porsche Cayman R, and that car shouldn't have been called an R. You know, it was a much more hardcore Cayman S with a few bits done to it. And the same goes with the 911T and the Cayman R as well too. They're not bad cars. They're great cars. They're brilliant cars, of course. I just think they've been badged wrong for the wrong reasons. So my answer is, if you're a newbie and you want a 911 Carrera that's a little bit different to the rest, then get yourself one of these, for sure. Would I have one personally? No, I wouldn't. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have one. I don't think it's enough of a difference. Maybe I need to back-to-back one of these with a Carrera, but I still don't think it justifies the £15,000-20,000 deficit that you get from a Carrera. You could go find a Carrera for 15 grand less, do the same bits, if not better things to it. What if you are wanting to buy, you're ignoring anything that I've been saying right now? You're saying, Sid, I don't care what you say, you're talking absolute rubbish, I'm going to buy a Carrera T, what option should I have? Well, get rid of the PCCB brakes, you don't need that. £6 grand option, they're costly as well to replace. You're not going to do track days in this car, get rid of it. I mean, they're fantastic, the brake feel is great, but so is the standard steel brakes. Having said that, a friend of mine told me, who drove a 911T with the standard steel brakes, that they fade a tad too much because it's the standard Carrera discs. But still, you know, some brake fluid would change that. Also, I'd definitely specify it with a manual gearbox. You've got to have it with a manual box, at least. Don't get it with a PDK, because if you do, just buy a Carrera S. I almost feel like Porsche shouldn't have given customers the option of speccing it with a PDK. They should have given it a 7-speed. It was weird to call it a 7-speed manual gearbox. By the way, I never really use 7th gear in this car until I'm on the motorway. I just use the first 3, 4, 5 gears, sometimes 6, on a little bit of a cruise.
The 911T really confused me at the beginning of this test. The name pays homage to the original back in the day, but in a totally different manner. It's not as light as we might all think, and it's not really an entry-level 911 compared to a Carrera. Its main highlight is still that it's a brilliant sports car. The damping and ride quality is excellent on B roads, and so is the steering. The power delivery from the twin-turbo flat 6 is smooth and very, very naturally aspirated, just doesn't feel turbocharged. Plus you get that buzz, that urge for you to go out for a drive for the sake of it, and more importantly, you can daily this car all year round. But so does a base Carrera for a lot less money. Conclusion, I'd take the normal one, but if you want a Porsche 911 that looks totally different to the rest in Carrera form, the T could be the one for you.